Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. Good to see you, Dr. Ball. I know you have a live stream coming at 11, so we'll try to get to a lot of the nuts and bolts of it before that, but we may go over a little bit. And really appreciative of the folks I'm going to bring on. Folks remember probably Libre Sankara from the episode that we had on the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Uh, Libre's been in Gaza for, I don't know exactly how long, but at least before October 7th of 2023. And so throughout this phase, this genocide that we'll be talking about today. And we're here to talk about an important case that's going on in Barbados. I think it's important to pay attention to these things and to now I think is an important time to put as much pressure as we can upon, public officials, corporations, all sort of nodes of power right now related to the state of Israel. Especially, it's always been important, but I think that there is somewhat of a recognition, even in spaces where there's been a denial over the last 21 months or so of how horrendous the effects of this genocide are. And I think it's a moment where, we see certain forces kind of jumping ship and recognizing that this is a genocide, or at the very least that there are war crimes going on, and at the very, very least that there's famine going on in Gaza, right? And so I think it's an important time for us to pay attention to these different cases, and then also to figure out how we can act ourselves to go on the offensive a little bit against this horrendous genocide. So I'm going to welcome our guests to the show. So Libre Sankara, good to see you, Libre, and Lalu Hanuman. Lalu, I'm going to start with you because you're the attorney working on this case in Barbados. So can you just explain to people a little bit about what the case is, what is being decided on Tuesday, and just the importance of it?
By way of introduction, as you said, my name is Lalu Hanuman. I'm a lawyer in Barbados, and I'm also the secretary of a group called Caribbean Against Apartheid in Palestine. The case is being brought by another organization called the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration, and I think the name says what it is. And we've applied to the local court here in Barbados for a number of declarations. The first declaration is that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza, because, as you know, no court globally has made such a declaration. Even the International Court of Justice, they've used the term a plausible genocide. And the second declaration we've asked the local court to make is that Israel has committed war crimes in Gaza, and then also that Israel has committed crimes against humanity in Gaza, and also that Israel is an apartheid state. And then we've made a number of different specific requests for declarations to do with local issues in terms of Israelis coming into Barbados, for example, that there should be proper checks at our frontiers, at our ports of entry. Barbados is an island, airport, and also seaports. Because at present there's an open visa policy. Anybody with an Israeli passport can enter Barbados visa-free for 3 months. And as a result of that, we know for a fact that a number of IOF soldiers have been coming into Barbados, including the former commander of the Israeli forces. This individual, he's actually come twice since October 2023. And he was the one who designed the policy that he has termed the industrial annihilation policy, which uses drones and AI technology to target people. He's been to Barbados twice, and there's no checks at any of our ports. These people come in freely, stay for the 3 months if they want to, or up to 3 months, and leave. So we are asking the local court to make a declaration that there should be proper checks at our borders on anybody coming in with an Israeli passport. Barbados has not only ratified the various Geneva Conventions, but it's also and the Genocide Convention, but it's also put the Genocide Convention into domestic law since 1985. So we're saying that as well as the courts having a jurisdiction to deal with the various international conventions, given that the Genocide Convention is part of local law, that they should also deal with it as a domestic issue.
Much appreciated. I know that there have been efforts to also like hold certain Israeli soldiers, IOF soldiers accountable for war crimes in other countries around the world. I know Belgium recently arrested and then I think interrogated and then maybe also released already a couple of IOF soldiers. Is that something that, you know, I know that's not directly part of the case that you're involved in, but does the case that you're working on kind of set the stage for those potential types of efforts in the future?
Certainly, we're saying that anybody who's suspected of being involved in a genocide should be properly questioned and interrogated. In fact, Barbados has a duty both under our local Genocide Act, but also under the International Convention to do so. We must either interview them and ensure that they're not involved in it. And if we find that they are, hand them over to the International Court of Justice. It's an obligation that Barbados has undertaken by ratifying the Geneva Convention. And I think in the Belgian case, they've actually handed the people over to the International Criminal Court. I believe that is what has happened in that matter.
Thank you. Yeah. Could you just give, you know, I mean, on this platform, we've been referring to this as a genocide for a long time now, but you know, I recognize that that is a legal term and that cases have to be made and won around that in order for it to really have any kind of meaning in a legal case, you know, and for to have some sort of legal consequences associated with it. Could you just share a little bit of some of the arguments that you've put forward around, you know, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity? I know that I'm sure that it is a lot, and that, but just kind of summarize some of the pieces of that argument that you've made.
Certainly. Various international agencies, even our local prime minister, her name is Mia Mottley, have said that there's a genocide in progress. And they've based that on the fact that civilians are being targeted, they're being deprived of food, they're being deprived of water, deprived of medication, fuel for cooking, and even the desalination plants in Gaza. A lot of them are running out of fuel because they don't have the fuel to desalinate the water. And also the fact that civilians are being targeted in such a big way. Infrastructure, civilian infrastructure is being targeted. All of these are indications of war crimes. The issue of reproduction, again, maternity wards are being targeted. People are being displaced, being forcefully moved from where they are. All of these contravene the Geneva Convention, and also, for that matter, the various, the Genocide Convention, as well as the various Geneva Conventions. There are 4 Geneva Conventions which set out what is required in times of war. And this is all a breach of those conventions.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll probably come back to you in a little bit, but Libre, I just want to give you some time. I know that you have been in Gaza for many months now. Maybe you could remind us how long you've been there and just talk about what you are seeing these days, what life is like trying to do the work that you do in Gaza at this point.
Yeah. So I've been here 16 months, since May 1st, 2024, as a humanitarian worker, doing various serving in different capacities, medical solidarity, water distribution, food distribution, um, and every time I I get on interviews, it's or talks, it's like it's getting worse, and like whatever I talked about last time, it's worse. And I laugh just because the absurdity of the situation, and the fact that there's been an intentional blockade on the Gaza Strip for over 20 years. The one that's happening this current one was imposed on March 2nd, and it's the complete and total blockade of any food, medicine, water, limited access to electricity, at times internet, fuel, right? And fuel is because of the sanctions that have been imposed on the Gaza Strip. A lot of things are dependent on either solar panels or fuel. We can't get in new solar panels. A lot of them have been destroyed, right? 97% of homes in the Gaza Strip have been completely demolished. Hospitals, as well as the generators at those hospitals, have become targeted, and we don't have pieces to replace those. So hospitals are functioning at partial capacity, not only because of fuel, but because we need to replace parts of generators that have been functioning since the beginning of the genocide and haven't been and haven't stopped since. So we're kind of getting back to this point at hospitals where, because the fuel is being let in a limited capacity, mostly into the south. Sometimes we're able to get it to the north. That hospitals are functioning on 1 or 2 day capacity, right? So you look through your things and you're like, okay, Al Shifa hospitals are going to close tomorrow if we don't get fuel. And all the hospitals are functioning at this capacity, which doesn't help with it doesn't help an already bad situation, because we're already dealing with the lack of supplies, the lack of medicine being able to get in, people dying of avoidable things, but also having to worry about whether or not your patients that are on machines will be able to survive the day if we don't get fuel. For example, imagine you're on an oxygen ventilator and it shuts down. Imagine if you're in the NICU and you're one of 4 babies in one of the incubators, because we have to limit our use of electricity, right? Imagine that all these things just shut down. And I remember this because this happened when we had to forcibly evacuate from Rafah and eventually came to Darbala and at Al Shifa, or Al Aqsa Hospital, sorry. And there was times where I had to get my phone and literally hold it for doctors while they were doing surgery, because they ran out of fuel and they need to see the people that they're doing surgery on. So the situation has gotten far worse, and what we're seeing as of now is over 100 people have died of starvation, literally have starved to death. And that number is only increasing, keeping in mind that 85% of the Gaza Strip is currently in famine, which means even if we get things in today, the food, we get in the water, that unless there is medically observed a recovery from this, that 85% of Palestinians are going to have long-term effects, and this is by default going to affect 2 to 3 generations worth of Palestinians, because when you're dealing with things like malnutrition, it most people haven't starved. They don't know what starving is, right? If you begin to eat away at your body fat, then you begin to eat away at your muscles, and then some of your organs begin to lower the capacity of function, so that you can push into the parts of your organs that need it the most, namely the brain and the heart. But eventually, those start to lose capacity as well. And so we're walking around and seeing more people, or just people that we've known each other the whole time. Everyone, when we see each other now, we're like, wow, you look skinny, because if you're lucky, you're eating once a day, which is you know what I'm able to do, thankfully, alhamdulillah. But the reality is that most people are eating every 2, 3 to 4 days. And on top of that, we have this very new way of massacring Palestinians that has been manufactured, which is called the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and it is exactly what it sounds like. When we're talking the use of the term humanity or humanitarian, sorry, in Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, it's a Western perspective of humanitarian, which is we need to we're going to kill these people. They're not civilized, and then if they do get any of this aid, they should be begging us, for these crumbs and thanking us for being so grateful. The reality is that before March 2nd, we had over 400 aid distribution sites all throughout the Gaza Strip. The reality now is that we only have 4, and 3 of those 4 are functioning in the south, southern part of the Gaza Strip. And up till now, less than 2 months in existence, I believe they started about May 28th. They've killed over 1,000 people at these aid distribution sites, and this is, to be clear, militarized aid distribution sites. And it is organization of U.S. Former special forces veterans that are mercenaries that are being paid upwards of $1,000 a day of our U.S. tax dollars, by the way, to work with and coordinate with the Israeli occupation forces to distribute aid. And let me tell you what the distribution is, guys. It's people going into a cage, a fenced-in cage. The doors are closed on both sides, and then when they eventually open it, people run, and whoever gets to the boxes first gets that. That's not distribution. That's not aid. There's nothing humanitarian about it. It is disgusting. And when people talk about it being like Squid Games, but it's like real life. And we have this whistleblower now, Anthony Aguilar, that is just confirming what we've already known to be the case, which we told, right? That's why all these international organizations and the UN refuse to work with the GHF. Why? Because there's no reality where militarized humanitarian distribution should be normalized. And it's starting to become normalized. It started in Gaza, but they're already starting to do it in other places. Why? Because it's been accepted here. So why not? Why not pay mercenaries to go kill people under the guise of aid distribution? So you can say, oh, we gave out all this food, and there's just some bad people. There's not. There's not. The only bad people, the only bad characters in this whole situation is the U.S. Funding and being complicit in the genocide that has been happening for over 22 months. And we begin to lose more people as Israel continues to get more aid. We've been demanding an arms embargo. We've been working with BDS to try to stop these ships, right? HC Opal, using the Antigua and Barbuda ship in the Caribbean. There's a ship that just came in from Panama. There are 13 Caribbean and Latin American nations that allow their ships to be used, right? And Israel will use them to bring in goods. And we have to stop things like this. And we have to stop being complicit and pretend like we're doing enough, because we're not. Because guess what? I'm still here helping people to survive a genocide that is still happening, that is still the most documented genocide of our time, and it hasn't ended. And neither has the genocide in Congo, neither has the genocide in Sudan. It's not enough. Whatever we're doing, it's not enough. We need more tangible actions and tangible things. And these are all part of a bigger long-term process and long-term commitment to liberation. It's not comfortable. Liberation is not comfortable, and we need to stop romanticizing and hyper-romanticizing resilience. We were just talking on this last interview that we just did, right? That we need to stop hyper-romanticizing resilience. People are way too comfortable being like, oh, the Palestinian people are so resilient. They don't want to be resilient. You think someone wants to starve so that you can be like, oh my God, but look at how they were able to find food at this distribution site and they weren't killed by the quadcopters. No one wants to hear that. And we shouldn't be comfortable like kind of pushing this narrative that it's always okay to be resilient as long as you survive. How about you just organize more, do more tangible things to end the genocide, and then people don't have to survive? How about people just live? And so it's getting more and more frustrating. And I shared in one of my latest updates, right? Just this week we lost two people. One was a 9-year-old girl who was in the Ayat, whose half of her body was burned after the school that she was forcibly displaced and staying at was bombed. Half her body was burned, and we didn't like. This is all during the intentional blockade of aid, so we couldn't get the proper care for her, right? So using vinegar to disinfect, her skin, and not having enough food for her to eat, and she was supposed to be medically evacuated, and we were trying so hard, but she was in such critical condition that they couldn't medically evacuate her the day that she died. So we were trying to push. She should have been evacuated 2 weeks ago, but Jordan didn't give their security clearance, because anybody that gets medically evacuated needs security clearance, even babies. They have to be approved that they're secure enough to leave. So this is one of many avoidable deaths that many Palestinians are having to deal with. And now it's just everyone is dying in different ways. It's not just the bombing, it's not the GHF sites, it's being buried alive under these 2000 MK-84 bombs, and a meningitis outbreak, that started last week, 2 weeks, about a month ago. So the situation is getting worse, and now 88% of the Gaza Strip is under evacuation orders and in the red zone. So there's less resources, there's less of everything, and it is becoming significantly harder to survive the genocide, which is why we need more to be done. The case that Lalu is leading is part of many things that need to be done, that will actually create justice and create accountability, because there has been no accountability, absolutely no accountability up to now. And recognizing the state of Palestine is not accountability. I'm sorry, that's not even the bare minimum. And so, yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot happening over here.
Libre, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it is gut-wrenching to hear you, share those stories, but it is really important, I think, that people really understand the realities of what is going on, because especially in the United States, yeah, we can find it on social media, it's true, but like there's such a coordinated kind of media blockade against real information about what is going on in Gaza, beyond, now some recognition that, yeah, some people are starving, right? Like as if this was not, you and many others have been, raising the alarms about this for months and months and months. And people in Gaza, other people in Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza, have been raising this, and people have not, mobilized to do what needs to be done. Lalu, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you're a part of a collective, Caribbean Against Apartheid in Palestine. I imagine that your efforts in Barbados, your legal efforts are one, one piece, but what are some of the other things that are going on, within that group maybe, or within, or more broadly, among people in the Caribbean organizing around this issue? And, I think that's just interesting for people to hear, regardless of where they are in the world. If they're in the Caribbean, obviously, maybe they can support some efforts. And if they're not, then maybe they can learn from some of the things that people are trying to organize around that you're aware of.
Yes, we've been around for about 10 years, and I take on board and I fully support what Libre says about recognition being more gesture politics in effect. But most of that 10-year period of our existence, we've been campaigning for just that, because there were 4 states in the Caribbean that never recognized Palestine: Jamaica, the Bahamas, Trinidad, and Barbados. And we've been lobbying for that recognition. It might and I agree, it's just a token gesture, but still it's better than nothing. So we've been campaigning on that. And eventually in April last year, we got these 4 states to recognize Palestine through our lobbying efforts. So that was one thing we achieved. A second issue is the issue of flags of convenience. A number of international shipping companies are registered in the Caribbean area. We have a group here called CARICOM, which is the equivalent of the European Union that exists within the former mainly British colonies in the Caribbean, but Haiti and Suriname are also involved there. And a number of international shipping companies register their ships as flags of convenience in terms of not paying, having to pay hefty registration fees and so on within the CARICOM area. So also we've been campaigning on that. Antigua recently threatened to deflag. I don't know if they have done it. One of the boats, one of their carriers, flags of convenience carriers that was registered in Antigua, that has been found to be shipping explosives from India to Israel. So those are the sorts of actions. But unfortunately, in the Caribbean, most of the people here are Christians as a result of their exposure to colonialism and the Bible as part of it. And they tend to see Israel through a religious lens. And the term Christian Zionist has been used to describe it, whereby they see Israel as being part of some sort of biblical prophecy in terms of its coming into being, and it's required before the second coming of Christ. So they unfortunately have a pro-Israel sympathy through lack of knowledge. So one of the other things we've been doing is trying to build awareness by showing films, having meetings, lobbying, letters to the media, and that sort of thing, in terms of our solidarity actions with Palestine, not just with Gaza, because we've existed pre the recent genocide, but of course, what's been going on in Palestine since the Balfour Declaration, in effect, has been a slow progression of genocide. Earlier, you were asking me about the definitions of genocide, and I've got before me now the actual extract from the convention, and it says, killing members of a specific group in whole or in part, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. So what we're seeing happening in Gaza fits squarely within the definition of what constitutes a genocide.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Libre, I know that I'm always amazed by how many organizing efforts that it seems that you are a part of, especially considering that I know that you're engaged in such critical work also on the ground in Gaza right now. But why don't you talk a little bit about some of the efforts that you want to highlight or that you're aware of, as well as maybe your own thoughts on what this moment actually demands of us or requires of us in terms of action.
Yeah, I was on this other interview talking about the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? The Coalition for the Elimination of Imperialism in Africa, Pan-Africanist, Pan-African organization, fighting to unite the African diaspora with our comrades and Africans in the homeland, to unify under socialism and to get rid of this these exploitative systems and structures that are in place, that have always been in place since the times of colonialism and imperialism, to not only exploit but to divide, to keep us divided, so that our distractions can be among us and not focusing on the people we need to be organizing against. With the coalition, we've continued to organize. We've supported on the ground efforts in Congo. We have a comrade that we were able to get a scholarship to, that is building grassroots building, with the working class in Kinshasa, and we're looking to continue to do this work, but also continue to support the efforts of the AES as it's a blueprint for the global South, but any real place that's trying to build actual democracy, not this vote 4 years and we have democracy type situation, which is the case in the U.S. and a lot of the West, and so. And I think it's Emancipation Day in the Caribbean, so there's all these nations that are celebrating their emancipation, but what we're trying to build is self-determination, sovereignty of all nations against imperialism, and we see that happening in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and all Pan-Africanists supported Palestine. And so we're just continuing in this tradition of supporting Palestine and being against genocide and being anti-Zionist, because Zionism comes from imperialism, and by default is doing a lot of the same things. That's why this is a U.S.-funded genocide being carried out by the Zionists. And in terms of our call to action, we really have to stop being comfortable, and I'll continue to say this until the day that the genocides are over, right? The genocide in Palestine, the genocide in Congo, the genocide in Sudan, the foreign intervention in Haiti, right? I will continue to say we are far too comfortable with things happening, that we allow them to happen. So we need to really question, what we want, what the world that we want to live in, and then really be honest. Because if you say you want a free Palestine, well, then what are you actionably doing, tangibly doing to create a free Palestine and the conditions for that? Because the reality is most people aren't. Reposting is not going to end the genocide. It's not going to stop a bomb, right? So we need to shut down ports. We need BDS campaigns, Palestine Action, amongst other organizations that are doing tangible things. People need to be in organizations organizing, right? Organizations that are anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist, and we need to do more tangible. This genocide, what we are seeing, what we are witnessing, what we are surviving, it should not be happening. And what people have shown to the world, what Palestinians have shown to the world that is happening, that all happens while we're still living in the thing that we're showing you. And so I would just, again, I said this recently, but the fact that that even if we're tired, we can't stop, should be enough to make people do more. Because on top of documenting for the world to see what's happening, on top of trying to find food and water, and make sure our people don't die, and make sure that every time that we're together with our people, that we take pictures and that we appreciate each other, because we don't know if we're going to see each other again. On top of all of that, we had to convince the world that more needs to be done. I mean, come on. Like, if we really are saying, that we're anti-imperialist, that we're revolutionaries, those are things that carry weight. They're not just words. We need action. We need international solidarity, and yeah, we need to stop making excuses, because when you all put your phone down, we don't get to, because we're living the thing that you're trying to escape when you put your phone down. And it's not to say that mental health is not important, right? For us, we don't have a choice. We don't have mental health over here. We don't, like, we have to survive and we have to do what we have to do. What I am saying is not enough is being done. And the excuse that you're tired, imagine what it means to be Palestinian and try to say that same thing. It doesn't have the same effect, because even if we're tired, we still got to keep on surviving this genocide and figuring things out for the day. So we need to get these borders open. We need to end this occupation. We need to get food in. We need to defund GHF. Get that out of here, right? Because we had distribution sites before, and we can do it without over 1,000 people being massacred, and without coordinating with the IOF, and without coordinating with U.S. mercenaries that are trigger happy. Come on now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, thank you. I mean, I actually, if anybody has not seen, again, to the point you made earlier, Libre, it's absolutely true that Anthony Aguilar is only confirming, from a person who is a Green Beret and, part of the U.S. Imperial war machine for decades, only confirming a reality that Palestinians have been, raising alarms about for months. But I do encourage people to listen to his interviews because they are an admission of the fact that GHF is engaged in war crimes. And he spells that out through references to which Geneva conventions that they're contravening and all of that. And I think that that is also one of the reasons, it's connected to why we're starting to see more reports about them within mainstream news, as well as some states now trying to distance themselves a little bit. But I think that it is really critical to, I know that this is not a liberatory demand at all, but like it is really critical to restore the the aid apparatus that existed before October 7th, where you had 600 plus trucks, something like that, a day bringing in aid and all of that. Um, Libre, could you talk a little bit about the water situation? Because I think a lot of people don't understand how this works in Gaza, like how actually people get water and why that is so challenged right now as well.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a quick reference to the trucks. Uh, the reality is we shouldn't be counting trucks. We should just let all of them in. This kind of there was a investigation done that was released in 2014 that Israel was counting calories to figure out what is the minimum caloric intake that Palestinians need, and then based on that, that's what they allow in. Um, uh, right. So there we do not have to count calories. We just need to let trucks in. And part of the things that are being denied is water access. Um, just to jump to that, and it's becoming far more difficult. There's a few reasons for that. Right now, versus the last time we talked, now 88% of the Gaza Strip is under evacuation orders or red zone, which means they're active military zones. Even though they're still bombing people in the 12% that's supposed to be supposedly safer. But in those places are desalination plants. And why do we need desalination plants? Because the Israelis intentionally poisoned the underwater aquifers that are under Gaza when they left. And now there is a desalination process that must be done for water to be consumable, if we can get it. And the way for that to happen is by using a generator to desalinate the water, and then the water can then be distributed to the communities. So we've lost access to some of the biggest desalination plants. Um, they've been intentional targets by the Israelis, right, to force people to move. They've blown up desalination plants, so they've kind of gotten rid of access to water or food in areas that they don't want people to be. And fuel is a big thing, right? The desalination plants run on fuel, and fuel has been crucial throughout the genocide because there's been an intentional attack on infrastructure, so there's not consistent access to electricity or fuel or solar, and we need all of these things to be functioning, but they're not. They're functioning at partial capacity. Even the desalination plants that we have now, because of the access to fuel, are only operating at maybe 20% capacity. And we're talking about upwards of 1.5 million people that have been forcibly displaced in their own land, living in tents. It's summertime right now, so it's hitting above 100 degrees. So there's more of a need for water, and there's less access to that water. Water trucks are being blown up. Aid workers are being killed while trying to deliver water, which is a human right, which is constantly being denied. And they also issued orders of the sea that people can't enter the sea. And so fishermen are affected, and people going into the bahar, into the sea, to freshen up a little bit under these conditions. And also because of this lack of water, we're seeing the rise of infectious diseases, right? There's meningitis outbreaks, scabies are coming back. So all of these things that under normal conditions, where we would have access to water and proper sanitation and be able to get rid of waste properly, we wouldn't have these things. But now we're seeing people dying from infectious diseases that are 100% preventable because of lack of access to water. And on top of the famine, people not having access to water is an added layer of the ways that the genocide is being done, and the ways that people are being forced to survive the genocide. So there's rationing of water if you get access to water, and if you're lucky enough, if not, you're waiting hours and hours in the hot sun to possibly get water that you can take back to your home that will be used for as much as they can stretch it out until they have to do the same thing the next day, all while surviving a genocide.
Yeah, it's just beyond comprehension, I think, for for so many of us. So I do have some questions that the audience sent in that I can ask, but before I do, Lalu, I just wanted to just go back to the case for a minute. So there's a decision that's happening on Tuesday. Could you just say a little bit more about what is being decided on Tuesday and kind of the importance of that?
The Barbadian state has made an application to the court that the matter be struck out. Struck out means, as the name suggests, thrown out, because they're saying that the court doesn't have jurisdiction to deal with the matter. And also they're saying that the claimant, which is the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration, doesn't have what's known as locus standi, which is a Latin term for legal standing, to bring the matter in the first place. Of course, we're challenging both of those positions. The judge has had written submissions and oral submissions from us and from the Attorney General's office on the matter, and he's due to hand down his decision on Tuesday morning at 9:30 Barbadian time. So that is where we're at currently.
Could you say just a little bit about how you addressed those? I know it's obviously a significant brief, I'm sure, but how you addressed those claims that it should be struck out?
Well, we're saying that under our local Genocide Act, which is known as Chapter 133A, it gives the court jurisdiction to deal with the matter. And we're saying that we've seen extradition cases in different parts of the world, one of the most prominent ones being the one to do with President Pinochet, the former Chilean dictator, where the House of Lords in England was engaged in that matter. And extradition involves both domestic law and international law. And the Attorney General here is saying that a domestic court cannot deal with international law issues. And we're saying, no, to the contrary, this case shows, the Pinochet case, in fact, there were 3 of them, shows that, in fact, a domestic court does have jurisdiction to enforce international obligations. Barbados, as I mentioned, had ratified the various Geneva Conventions. There are 4 of them. Also, there are various protocols there that Barbados has also ratified. They're optional protocols. But more importantly, it's ratified the Genocide Act, and it's incorporated the Genocide Act into local law. So we're saying that most certainly the court has jurisdiction to deal with the matter. In terms of the locus standi issue, we're saying that the organization, the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration, is an activist, humanitarian activist organization. It's being done through its general secretary, who is a Barbadian citizen. And there's various case law that shows that, in fact, in such instances, there is locus standi, there is a local standing, as it were, to bring such a case. So those are the sorts of arguments we've advanced.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important stuff because I think a lot of countries' legal systems face similar kinds of challenges where they try to bring a case that's related to international law, and the courts, or the state makes arguments that actually, that international law is somehow outside of their purview, or that they don't have obligations to, enforce local laws that would support international law, really, which, I think seems quite, seems like a cop out on one level, but it also seems, kind of self-contradictory in certain ways. So I appreciate you just talking about that for a minute. Some folks, so I know, Lalu, as the attorney here, you can't talk about necessarily advocacy around this case. But some people are asking in the chat, if they were to do something in London, for instance, like if they were to protest at the Bayhan High Commission, which I understand is like a sort of like an assembly or an embassy or something like that, would it be the most effective thing to write on banners or placards to get through to the Bayhan government? I don't know if that's something that you can address, Lalu, but maybe Libre, you have some thoughts on that matter as well, if not.
Well, I'll just
Uh,
say a couple of words. But sorry, or yeah, it's within. I believe Jarad, you're based in America, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Are you? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. The person
Within
who asked the question was in London, by the way, just to clarify.
yeah. Okay. Well, the person in London might know. Within Commonwealth states, in terms of their interaction with each other, they don't have embassies. They have what's known as high commissions. So Barbados is a Commonwealth state. So we have what's called a high commission in London, and Britain has a high commission in Barbados. But in effect, they're embassies. It's just not a name that's used within Commonwealth jurisdictions to describe their embassies. But obviously, as an American, probably it's an alien term. But so the term high commission just means embassy in effect. And the term Bajan is a colloquial way of saying a Barbadian,
there
right?
you go.
It's just a colloquial term. So the person is asking whether, in fact, protesting outside the Barbadian embassy in London would be useful. That's my understanding of the question. And the answer is no, because it's a judicial issue. It's not a government issue. It's not the Barbadian government that's taking action. It's the court that's determining the issue. So protesting against the Barbadian government would in fact, might even be said to be counterproductive. But a better thing to do would be to protest against your own government, the British government, for their complicity in what's happening. I mean, this gesture politics about recognizing the Palestinian state if certain preconditions are met, it's so much vacuous nonsense. Really, the best thing you can do as a British citizen is to organize people to close down Whitehall, block the streets. I mean, 500,000 people have come out in different protests against the genocide, but rather than walking, sit down on the streets, block the bridges. I mean, the good thing about London is from a protest point of view, you need bridges to get from one side of the River Thames to the other. So it's quite easy to close down London by blocking the bridges. There are only 5 bridges. Get thousands of people to go and sit down and block the bridges. Close down London. London is totally complicit as it is with the genocide in terms of supplying arms, with RAF overflights that are seeing what's happening on the ground and relaying information back to the IOF. And also in terms of selling arms and diplomatic support to Israel. So if you want to assist the case in Barbados, you want to assist the people in Gaza, close down London, block the bridges, get thousands of people out. Yes, of course you'll be arrested, but that's all part of the struggle. If you're committed, you have to be prepared to actually get arrested. Sorry, Libre, I will hand over to you.
Nope, that was great.
Awesome. All right. So Trinbagoans for Palestine just said the next 2 days, please amplify this Barbados case as much as we can. We don't want them to strike the case out. That's just a message to people listening in. So one other question that was raised is, do you have any thoughts on what posturing or virtue signaling in the global South means in the absence now of any substantial or sort of opposing action? And they gave the example of dropping the aid drops from, the air that I think Jordan maybe has done. But some of these things, again, I guess, like state recognition, again, some of these attempts that seem more symbolic, right, versus substantial. And that was the question, basically. Yeah.
I'll uplift something that Anas, a local Gazan journalist, shared. Um, we can't get distracted by these symbolic talks of statehood, these symbolic gestures. We need to talk about the forced starvation and the genocide that is happening that needs to end. The recognition of a Palestinian state does not stop the genocide. The PA, to a certain extent, is complicit in the genocide, and so we have to be very clear with what we're trying to do is end a genocide, and in order to do that, these symbolic gestures are not going to help. These airdrops, actually, if we want to get really serious, I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about the airdrops, right? The airdrops kill people and they harm people. Keep in mind that people are living in tents. They're not living in homes, and these big aid things are just plowing through people's either homes or tents. So people get injured or people get killed through these aid drops. And they typically are dropped in areas that are in red zones. So now you're telling people that they should go to a red zone where they're more likely than not to be a target to get aid that is not that is being dropped from the sky when it could just come through the border if we open the border, right? And it be delivered in a safe and a dignified manner. But these aid drops just are not any type of long-term solution. And the reality is that any country doing these are also benefiting from it, right? There was an investigation revealed of how much millions of dollars the Jordanians made after the symbolic airdrops that they did just last year. So they're not affected. And the other thing that people aren't even talking about anymore, which I knew would happen, is the throwing of bottles. Right, there was this Egyptian that threw water and lentils, and studied the current, etc., etc. Um, these are trends. Like, again, we need tangible actions. Maybe that makes you feel good, but guess what? You feeling good doesn't stop a bomb from falling. You feeling good doesn't stop the drones. You feeling good doesn't stop a ground invasion. So I'm sorry, it's not about you, and we need to stop making it about people that aren't in Gaza. It's about Gazans, and it's about ending the genocide in a tangible way, not in a feel-good way, but in an actual way, because there's nothing comfortable about this or having to live this or having to see this or having to have these experiences that will live with us, past even past this genocide. And so we don't need symbolic anything. We need tangible, and we need to be moving and be realistic about doing more of the tangible things and stay focused. Right? They're gonna tell you, oh, Palestinian statehood, Palestinian statehood. Okay, but what about the genocide that's happening in Palestine? That is not stopping. Like, the recognition of Palestine isn't stopping the illegal building of 28 new settlements in the West Bank. You're not stopping them from killing people. So let's focus on the main task, which is ending the genocide, opening the borders, ending the occupation, and having actual justice. This has nothing to do with peace. This has everything to do with justice and stopping genocides that are happening in Palestine, Gaza, in Palestine, in Congo, and Sudan.
Thank you both so much. Really appreciate the work that you both are doing. And thank you for coming on, talking about this case. Libre, thanks for joining again to share, your perspective and things that are going on around you in Gaza. Um, uh, PJ said, hope folks all over the global north take Lalu's words to heart. That was around when you were talking about shutting down the bridges in London. You know, we all have we had a conversation with Hala Sabah from the Samir Project a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, look, wherever you are, there are, complicit institutions and companies and, government entities around you that are potential nodes for you to organize, around. And so people really need to step it up and, keep going in these times when I do think there is an effort to co-opt, change the narrative, distract, as you said, Libre, and we need to stay really focused on all the things that you just laid out. So I'm going to let you both go because I know that there's important work that you both need to get to, but this has been wonderful. Appreciate you both stopping by to talk about this. Folks, make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this conversation with other folks so that they can hear about this important case. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please
All
get
the
the word
best.
out by Tuesday. We need as much attention on this as possible, y'all.
All right. Thank you. All right.